Okay, so we're going to take a look at this incredible scene that takes place and talk more about this transition that's happening in the desert, because we already see that the leadership is disappearing, right? Miriam, Aaron, and then Moses, right? And there'll be a transition. And we all know that a country is always in crisis when there's a transition in leadership. The best system, of course, is the idea of an election and a transition, right? Without firing a shot. But there are very few countries in the world that do that, right? Usually Western countries are able to do that. Many other countries, it's a question who has the power and the might to seize power. So this is a critical moment for the people of Israel, and it's the first transition. Never happened before. This is from slavery to freedom. Moses, Aaron, Miriam leading the people, and now leadership passing on, new leadership coming in. First time in the history of the Jewish people. So if they don't get it right, it's going to be a bad pattern for the future. So we go to this very strange story, a story that is somewhat disturbing about Moses and the issue of the water that the people are complaining about. So we'll take a look at the text itself and comment a little bit on it while we're reading it. The text is from Numbers 20, verses 2 through 13. Miriam died there, and she was buried there. The community was without water, and they joined against Moses and Aaron. So why were they without water? Well, there's a definite connection to Miriam passing, because Miriam was the source of water, right? Miriam is connected to water. She saves Moses, right? Follows him in the basket through the water, right? That is drifting, that he drifts and he's picked up by the daughter of Pharaoh. So there's no water after Miriam disappears, right? After she passes away. So one of the things that's happening in the desert is all this that God provided for them, water, manna, sukkah in the form of the clouds, right, that protected the people of Israel. We're even told that their clothing didn't deteriorate. Everything provided for them like a parent provides for a child. It's going away. They have to grow up. They can't continue thinking that their leaders are going to clothe them, right, and they're going to find them water, and they're going to find them meat when they complain because they didn't like the taste of the manna. It's slowly but surely going away, and they're going to have to learn to be adults. They're going to have to do it on their own, and they have a really tough time doing it, which is the same of any child who suddenly discovers they now are not totally dependent upon their parents, and they got to start figuring things out, and usually it's very, very difficult. So it's difficult for the nation. The people quarreled with Moses, they do that a lot, saying, "If only we had perished when our brothers perished at the instance of the Lord. Why have you brought the Lord's congregation into the wilderness for us and our beasts to die there?" So what was what perishing are they talking about? At the instance of the Lord. That was Korach, right? That's the same language. Korach and his rebellion, how did they die? Swallowed up by the earth. Instantaneous, right? Now they're thirsting to death. So we could have better to die. Let's choose which way we die. It would have been better to die that way. Why did you make us leave Egypt to bring us to this wretched place? A place with no grain or figs or vines or pomegranates. Which place has figs, grain, vines, and pomegranates? Which place is that? It's called the land of Israel. Why aren't they in the land of Israel? Because they refused to enter. It was their fault. They said, we'll follow the spies who said it's too dangerous to enter the land of Israel. So here they are complaining, we're in the desert. You're in the desert because of what you chose to do. You refused to go into the land of Israel. Accept responsibility. That's why you're in the desert. Don't look at me. There was not even water to drink, they say. Moses and Aaron came away from the congregation to the entrance of the tent of the meeting. They fell on their faces. Okay, two interpretations fell on their faces. One is, I can't take this anymore. They just fall down. This people is driving me nuts. And the other is, you fall on your face when you're praying to God, particularly for protection, right? They prostrate themselves before God. The presence of the Lord appeared to them, which leads us to think they were praying to God. And the Lord spoke to Moses, saying, "You and your brother Aaron take the rod and assemble the community, and before their very eyes order the rock to yield its water." Order it, he said. "Thus you shall produce water for them from the rock, and provide drink for the congregation and their beasts." Moses took the rod, famous rod, right? The rod that brought the 10 plagues. The rod that created, that turned into a snake and back to a rod to impress Pharaoh. That's right in this to say what the rod is. Everyone knows what this rod is. We've read about it many times, and people have witnessed it. So Moses and Aaron assembled the congregation in front of the rock, and he said to them, "Listen, you rebels, shall we get water for you out of the rock?" So I made bold the key words. First of all, listen, you rebels. It's not a nice way to talk to your people, right? Moses has completely lost his cool. God didn't call them rebels, did he? He just said, they're thirsty. Go take the rod and get them some water. They're thirsty. When you're thirsty, you complain. God doesn't seem overly upset. He's got a solution. Take the rod, go get water. Moses insults them. You rebels. The rabbis ask later, we'll see, why is it rebellion to ask for water when you're thirsty? Right? They're scared. We need water. Legitimate complaint. Shall we get water? Who are we? We are Moses and Aaron. Right? Not God and Moses and Aaron. We here means we will get water for you out of this rock. Moses raised his hand and struck the rock twice. Why did he have to hit it twice? 2 reasons. He's so angry at the people and he lost his cool, he's just beating away at the rock. Or the other is, he hits the rock and what happens? Nothing. So he hits the rock again. This time, God lets the water come forward, but then he's got a word for Moses afterwards, right? Now, why do I suggest that? Remember in the story of Akedat Yitzchak, right? So God speaks to Abraham, tells him to bring Isaac as a sacrifice. And he speaks to him several times. And every time, Abraham answers. But the last moment when the Malach Hashem, when the angel of God sees him raise a knife to Yitzchak, and wow, he's really going to do this, what happens? He screams out, Avraham. But the Torah has a second word, Avraham. He screams, Avraham, Avraham. Why does he scream twice? Because the first time Abraham didn't listen. Abraham didn't, he said, I so much want to hear God's voice to stop me from doing it. It must be me. It's not God. Can't be God. So Avraham, and he continues the knife, so the angel screams again, Avraham, and stops him. That's what's going on here when you have a repetition. He hits the rock. That didn't work. Boom. Hits the rock again. This time it works. Okay. So Moses raised his hand, struck the rock twice with his rod. Out came copious water, and the community and the beasts drank. Problem solved. God's not done, though, because Moses created a bigger problem. But the Lord said to Moses and Aaron, 2 of them together, because you did not trust me enough to affirm my sanctity in the sight of the Israelite people, therefore you shall not lead this congregation to the land that I've given them. Those are the waters of Merivah, meaning that the Israelites quarreled with the Lord, through which he affirmed his sanctity. So he solves the problem, but then he turns to Moses and Aaron as, you failed to make my name holy. And that's your job. You were supposed to make my name holy. And you used to know how to do it, Moses. You always gave me credit. You gave God credit. You never said, I took you out of Egypt, right? God took us out of Egypt. You never said you brought the plagues or stopped the plague. You said God did it. Now, suddenly, you've presented yourself as if you are the Savior, as you are the miracle worker. And what's the danger of that? You become the object of worship. You become the God. And that would undo everything that we had done from the beginning, which was to declare Pharaoh is not God. No human being is God. Moses is your leader. He's my prophet. He's my lawgiver, but he's not God. And now suddenly you did a godly thing. So instead of l'haktisheni, to make my name great, to show that you're not the great one, Moses, you're a great leader, but you're not a God, you just undid everything we did. You just presented yourself as a God who brings forth water, right? So that's impossible. We can't accept that, Moses. And therefore, you're not going to enter the land of Israel. And the people will know that I've punished you, that I am the God, and I reward and I punish. And of course, the punishment to us is excessive, right? 40 years he dedicated his life, and now he makes one mistake, and his lifelong ambition is ended? A bit excessive. But he's the leader. And when a leader makes a critical mistake, the punishment has to be obvious to the nation. It can't be a minor punishment. It has to put him in his place, and God does that. So now we have some commentary. Would that he had perished when our brothers perished. So that goes back to the recent rebellion of Korach, when Dathan, Abiram, and Korach and his followers were swallowed up by the earth. They were instantaneous deaths that now seem preferable to slow death by thirst. So they pick up in the language of rabbis and say, you realize what they're complaining about. They don't want to die of thirst. They have no idea how they're going to get water because they're in a desert. And you know what? They're right. They're not in the land of Israel yet where they'll be able to find water. They really are in a desert, and there really is a shortage of water, which is why God doesn't get angry at them, right? And they say, this is a horrible way to die. And the rabbis affirm that. This is their fear, that they're going to die of thirst, a legitimate fear when you're stuck in the desert, and the one who provided you water is gone. Miriam is gone. So then it says, assemble the people. The people have assembled in rebellion against Moses and Aaron. Now they are enjoined to assemble the community to be united in witnessing God's saving power. So God says to Moses, those people assembled against you, go back out there, reassemble them, and we're going to show them that I'm going to bring them to the land of Israel. I'm going to provide for them here in the desert, and then there will be a nation in the land of Israel. Assemble them again. This time, we're going to bring water from the rock, and you're going to do it in my name, right? So we're going to ease the problem of water, and we're going to remind the people they have a destiny, and I stand with them. I will bring them to the land of Israel. They will not die here in the desert. Then we have the words, take out and bring forth. One is the water, and the other is leaving Egypt. So these words are used for taking out the water, but it's the same idea as taking out of Egypt. Same words. Both they and Moses attach the verb in the wrong subject, because in both cases it's God who does the bringing out, not Moses and Aaron. So what happens is both times the verbs are used incorrectly. It's they who are bringing themselves out of Egypt, and it's Moses and Aaron bringing forth the water, and God says you got the noun and the verb wrong. Let's switch it. I brought you out of Egypt, and I'm providing the water, and we're going to fix that right now. And the only way to fix that now is to show the people you made a horrible mistake, and for me to assert myself and show that you're not my co-God, you are my subject, just like they are, just like I chose you for leadership. So the Bechor Shor, excellent commentator, brought forward by Jacob Milgram, who's the expert on the book of Numbers. Milgram is it. He was late. Jacob Milgram's specialty was Leviticus and Numbers. Moses' sin, for which he is condemned to die outside the borders of the promised land, is his presumptuous claim at the very moment he is supposed to sanctify God in the eyes of the people. That is, he and Aaron who will bring forth the water from the rock. So Bechor Shor says that's the sin. The sin is that it was presumptuous to act as if he was God. And that is his profound sin. Some suggest, on the flip side, number 5, it is because he disobeyed God and hit the rock instead of speaking to it. In the parallel episode in Exodus, he is actually told to strike the rock. There's two stories about water. The first time, God tells him to strike the rock. And such efficacious gesture with a staff have been an authorized part of Moses' role as a worker of wonders from the beginning of his mission. So the people had seen this staff work wonders before, but they never saw it work wonders in the name of Moses, only in the name of God. Now the question is asked, he's angry at Moses and he punishes him. Why isn't he angry at the people? There's no, in all the other stories when the people rebel, right? The golden calf at the 10 Commandments story, what happens? God's ready to destroy them. Moses is saying, no, you can't do that, God. No, I stand by my people. It will look terrible. You took them out of Egypt. Now you destroy them. You look capricious. You can't do that. And God gives in and preserves them. Same thing, Korach, the rebellion. I'm going to destroy the people. No, let's just focus on the rebels. Leave the other people alone. Moses is always defending against God's anger because the people are rebellious. And in this story, God has no anger whatsoever. Just, I'll fix it. I'll get them water. So the question is asked by the commentators, why isn't God angrier with the people? He doesn't threaten to destroy them or even punish them, as did for past rebellions. So the answers that are provided, they didn't complain about meat or the bland nature of the manna, as their elders had. In other words, remember, this is the new generation. The first generation is gone. The only ones left are Moses, Aaron, Joshua, Caleb. That's it. That generation of rebels has passed. So God looks and says, this is not a rebellion. They complained because the manna didn't taste like steak, right? So that's a complaint. I'm providing you food in the middle of the desert, and you don't like the flavor, and you're rebelling against me, right? That was something that God couldn't tolerate. Now, as the commentary says, they demanded water. And Rashi notes, death by thirst is a horrifying prospect. Nor did they say they wanted to return to Egypt. Every other time, what did they say? Let's go back to Egypt. I said, what do you mean, let's go back to Egypt? You're going to reverse history? I took you out of slavery. You'd rather be slaves than eat manna because it's a little bit boring in terms of the flavor? And he got mad. Here, they don't say that. They just say, we don't want to die of thirst. When he asked rhetorically why Moses had taken them from Egypt, when they asked rhetorically, they meant that he should have led them on a route that would afford at least some basic necessities as drinking water. God is indulgent of people who have a legitimate complaint, even when they voice it more provocatively than they should. So the commentators say, you know why God didn't get mad? They had a good point. They're thirsty and they don't know what to do. And it's their parents who rebelled and caused them to be stuck in the desert, not them. They didn't rebel, so they're confused. Where's the water? We haven't entered the land of Israel yet. It's not our fault. And God says, you got a point. Let's give them some water. So that's why he doesn't get angry. But who got angry? Moses got angry, called them rebels. Well, at that point, God said, you failed to make my name holy, which was your job. You've lost your temper with the people. You can't do this anymore, Moses. You're done. You can't lead the people. You're failing in every area because you're exhausted and you can't deal with it anymore. You're done. And then we'll move on to the appointment of Joshua, and he'll take over. And remember what we said just before, I think I mentioned it. When the war breaks out, right, there's no leadership. Right? Towards the end of the parsha, there's no leadership. Aaron's dead. Moses is in mourning. Miriam's gone. Joshua hasn't taken over yet. So the people fight their own battle because there's no leaders. That's where God said, now I have a nation here. I have a real nation. They stood up and defended themselves. Now let's get new leaders. Okay, Joshua, you're going to be the next leader and take them out. It was their assertion of their independence as a nation, even without leadership. To fight that battle, God says, it's time. It's time to enter the land of Israel. Moses doesn't see that, which is why he can't lead anymore. And finally, the rabbis ask the question why it says the rock. Hit the rock. And the rabbis teach that God had created a rock that he used often as a source of miraculous waters. This was the rock that the angel revealed to Hagar when her son Ishmael was dying of thirst, and from which Moses was commanded to draw water 40 years earlier. And that same rock accompanied the people throughout their wanderings, as long as Miriam was alive. After her death, it ceased to yield water and was hidden. In other words, the miracles are done. No more miraculous water, no more splitting of seas, no more manna falling from heaven. You have to enter the land of Israel. You know why? Because you can't live in this desert. You'll die of thirst. That's the lesson. No more delay. You can't stay here anymore. I'll give you water this last time because you have a good complaint. And then what do we read about immediately after this? They start their trek into the land of Israel, combat their enemies when they need to, and then, of course, Joshua takes over. Deuteronomy will come. He'll give a big speech of farewell, and then the people of Israel will enter the land. This is the story of transition from childhood to adulthood to becoming a real nation, and to new leaders who understand what it means to be a nation, not what it is to be a dependent nation living in a desert, waiting for God to provide everything. Shabbat Shalom. We'll finish up with the Musaf service. Please rise.